Hello, Joan. We're starting with questions. First question, the endless Brexit saga doesn't seem to stop. Boris Johnson said on the 10th of December, the no-deal Brexit is a distinct possibility. Are the Northern Ireland issue and fishing rights worth the damage?
Okay, well, the two sides are still talking. So we're not at a no-deal situation just yet. Obviously, we're going to run right up against the deadline. We might even go beyond the deadline, which is the 31st of December, and that's the end of the transition period during which the UK has still been having to follow EU rules. But we're not quite there. And as we know, yesterday, Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission chief, agreed by telephone to extend the talks for another week. Up until next Sunday. So that's a bit more positive, actually, than it appeared to be last week on Wednesday, when the mood was very pessimistic after the previous telephone call, where the UK side that it had made quite a lot of constructive suggestions, and the EU basically didn't respond to that. So it's looking a bit more positive. Actually, our call, the EIU call, is that a deal is more likely than not at this stage, given that more than 95% of the framework of a deal has been agreed. Now, just let me say, though, I kind of disagree with the premise of your question. You know, number one, the first premise is that Brexit is going to be extremely damaging for the UK. Now, there is inevitably going to be disruption under either scenario of a deal or a no deal. There will be disruption in early 2021. It could be greater if there is no deal. So there's going to be some short-term pain, actually, for both sides. But there will be pain, for the economic pain for the UK. But over the medium and long term, the UK is likely to thrive outside the EU. And that's because many of the features of the UK and the UK economy, which has made it a leading global economy, will continue regardless of whether the UK is a member of the EU or not. So over the medium and long term, there isn't really a major question. The second kind of premise of your question, which I disagree with, is that the idea that this is just all about rather trifling matters, maybe of fishing rights and the Irish border issue. Fundamentally, this is about much more than that. It's about the whole principle of sovereignty, of independence, about the UK being free to determine its own future, free from EU regulations and EU rules. And so primarily, this is a political issue, and both sides are driven ultimately in the negotiations by political pressures. The UK government has a mandate from the British people to leave the EU, and if possible to negotiate a deal with the EU, but that is the political pressure, which is why there's limit to the compromises that can be made on sovereignty by the UK. And on the other side, obviously, the European Commission and the EU has a clear political mandate as well, which is to defend the integrity of the single market, which is why we come down to these two issues. And probably, you know, the key issue is this one of the level playing field, trying to find a mechanism, which is what the talks are really about this week, to resolve that sticking point, which I'm happy to talk about, but that's probably too much detail for your listeners.
No, it's great. But will the UK form, do you think, a new economic and political alliance with the former colonies, now mainly in the Commonwealth, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and even the United States of America? Will it be redirected economically and politically after the Brexit happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that is one clear priority for a post-Brexit British foreign policy. The Commonwealth is historically a very important organization for the UK. It's an organization of 53 countries with which the UK has very close ties. And I think it will become undoubtedly more important to the UK in the coming years. These are countries which speak the same language, which share the same common law, and share much more besides in terms of democracy and institutions and so on. And the Commonwealth accounts for about a third of the world's population, 40% of people under the age of 30. So enhancing trade and investment between the UK and other members of the Commonwealth, I think, will be high on the agenda of the UK government, and has already been so actually in the years since the Brexit vote in 2016. So once it's no longer bound by EU rules, the UK will be much freer to sign new trade deals with other members, other Commonwealth members. And the UK hasn't really wasted any time in that regard. So Canada, which is the second most valuable Commonwealth member in terms of trade, UK traded, it was worth, I think, about 20 billion pounds sterling trade between the two countries in 2019. We've already signed a deal with Canada, which is a kind of continuity deal, which is basically just adapting the existing deal with the EU to the UK. And we hope to sign a bespoke trade agreement with Canada next year. Australia obviously is the biggest trading partner and Commonwealth member with the UK, and it's likely that a deal will be sealed with Australia before the end of this year. So obviously the Canada deal also brings the UK one step closer to signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership Deal too. And that would be a partnership with 11 very dynamic Pacific members of that organization, which the UK is very keen to do. And I think beyond that, there's a lot of potential to increase trade between the UK and other very important and large Asian and African members of the Commonwealth, such as Nigeria, for example, obviously India, where to a large degree, I would say that trade between the UK and those countries has underperformed. But there's a lot of scope. You know, it's probably a low base, a low starting point. So there's a lot of scope for increasing trade with those countries in the coming years. So I think that's, you know, a very positive thing for the UK.
Great. Now about something about the Western Balkans. The ideas of 5 countries plus 1 territory, so-called West Balkans 6, is now very current, very likely to form mini Schengen Union or the Balkan Union or Yugoslavia differently. So Balkan countries will be reasonable once in their history, to put down the economic barriers and to show the spirit of economic cooperation instead of sheer spite. Stop waging wars and stop waging economic wars and tariffs and everything else, because the Balkans is actually shrinking. The people are going out of Balkans. Tim Judah said that in The Economist. The people are losing. The countries are losing people, so about 25 to 35 to 40% of the people. Is it the last chance for the West Balkans 6 to get reasonable and start cooperating?
Yeah, I don't think it's the last chance. So what you're referring to, obviously, is this deal that was done in Sofia in November, and I think November the 10th it was, where the 6 Western Balkan countries that aspire to join the EU formed this common regional market, CRM, or mini Schengen Union. And that was obviously part of the Berlin process that was launched by Germany in 2014. And the idea of this common regional market is obviously to intensify cross-border economic cooperation, and promote these countries' progress towards joining the EU. And I understand that the action plan, which covers the period 2021 to 2024, contains measures to eliminate trade barriers, to coordinate investment policies, and to things such as ensuring reciprocal recognition of professional qualifications. There's also a green agenda component to this agreement as well. I think a lot of this is also on the part of the EU. It's about trying to allay concerns among the Western Balkan countries about the slow pace of their integration with the EU. So this emphasis on regional cooperation, increasing intra-regional trade, and so on. That's meant to be seen as a stepping stone to full membership, to accession to the EU's single market. My view is that this is not going to be a game changer. I think it's unlikely to result in substantial increases in regional trade anytime soon, or even to narrow very much the gap between these countries' actual and potential trade. And I think one reason for that is precisely because there is a widespread suspicion in the region that the EU is promoting this agenda, the regional, intra-regional cooperation and intra-regional trade, as a substitute for EU enlargement to the Western Balkans. And there's probably, good reasons to be suspicious of this agenda. I think it's increasingly difficult to escape the conclusion that the EU is pretending to pursue the enlargement process, and the countries of the Western Balkans are pretending that it's really happening. I mean, it seems to be a kind of charade, if you like. And it does beg the question at what point, both sides will stop pretending and face reality, or will this just carry on? I mean, it seemed to be the case in 2019, when it came to that EU summit, which was supposed to give the green light to the opening of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, and then France and others, supported by, France in particular, said no to both North Macedonia and Albania. Others, Netherlands and others, were prepared maybe to give the green light to North Macedonia, but not to Albania. And it seemed at that moment that finally somebody was actually kind of being honest about what was the position of many leading countries in the EU, which was that, President Macron's position was that he didn't really want to see any further enlargement until the EU got its own house in order, first of all, and secondly, until these countries themselves address many of the kind of substantive issues that have been holding back either the negotiations themselves, for the ones that have started, or prevented the opening of negotiations. Now, we know that then a compromise was reached earlier this year, and a new negotiating framework was agreed. But I think if we're honest, we have to say that there's considerable opposition within the EU itself, within some leading member states, to further enlargement. There's significant issues within the Western Balkan countries themselves in terms of them there being anywhere near meeting the accession criteria in many different areas. But yet the whole process is carrying on. But at a certain point, we have to ask, if this is such a remote prospect, accession is so far into the future, is it any longer an anchor for policy, for governments in the region? Is it really a realistic prospect on which these countries should be orienting themselves strategically? So I think this initiative is is viewed with suspicion by countries within the region, and maybe there's good grounds for that. Which is not to say that there aren't good reasons for these countries to continue cooperating, to continue to try to increase intra-regional trade. But I'm afraid that the experience so far is quite bleak, and intra-regional trade remains very low, despite geographic, cultural, linguistic proximity. And we also know that all these countries have also been members of the Central European Free Trade Agreement, CEFTA, but membership hasn't really increased the share of intra-regional trade in total trade for these countries either. So I'm rather skeptical that this is going to be a game changer. There's obviously nothing in itself, there's nothing bad about this. I'm just not convinced that it's going to change things all that much.
I think that they have, these countries have just two options. The joining the European Union is not the option, and the only one is to be outside and cooperate between themselves, or be outside and do not cooperate. So that's pretty much it. Europe has seems to be quartered in a way, and the first division is North-South division, because the northern countries are pretty much into fiscal discipline, and South is much more into splurge. Even Matteo Salvini decided to, before he fell from his position, to print some para-euros, or kind of new liras, some coupons, something like that. And the northern countries like the Netherlands or Germany, they feel very uncomfortable about that. What do you think? Croatia is going to accept euro. Greece is not financially sane still. What do you think about this north-south split in terms of money and fiscal things? Is it going to be solved anytime soon? It lasts for 10 years or even more.
I think the divisions within the EU are not just north-south or east-west. They also exist within nation states as well. There are obviously differences which came out during the pandemic, particularly in the debate over the recovery fund. Differences particularly between the north and south, between the kind of more fiscally conservative or fiscally frugal countries in the north, and those in the south, which obviously have much less fiscal space, are much poorer, have already high levels of public debt and so on. So there is a divide there, but the divide is not just about finances, public finances and the management of them. The divisions are also over values as well, and not just between East and West, but also between North-South, but also within nation states as well. And those have come to the fore very clearly, I think, during the pandemic. I don't think they ever went away after the global financial crisis. In fact, I think they've become more entrenched. They've grown. I think the pandemic and the aftermath will actually exacerbate many of these existing fault lines within the bloc, and that could lead over the medium term to more political ruptures as well. I think because what we've seen is that this crisis has had an asymmetric impact on the bloc, on the EU, and the recovery will also be asymmetric too. And so that will only exacerbate the division. So we had this very acrimonious debate over what kind of recovery fund would be suitable in early 2020. This went on, and that did reveal, as you rightly pointed out, very sharp differences within the bloc. Now, a compromise was eventually reached to provide this 540 billion euros in credit lines. And then we had a more ambitious response after France and Germany took the initiative. And we eventually, got a deal. And it was agreed, the European Commission 750 billion euro proposal. It was agreed in July after a lot more disagreement and dissent. And then it's been waiting approval right up until very, very recently in December, because Hungary and Poland were rejecting a clause which was tying funding to adherence to the rule of law. So, these divisions have been papered over. We've got the recovery fund, we've got the budget agreed now, and we'll start to see disbursements of funds into next year. The ECB has also played a very important role, obviously, in terms of providing liquidity, especially to those countries in the south and to Greece, to Italy and Portugal and Spain and so on, which had much less fiscal space to respond to the crisis. So for the moment, the cracks have been papered over, but I don't think that they've gone away, and I think they will manifest themselves again. And there's many other issues. It's not just about fiscal integration that these where we see these sorts of fault lines. There's also fundamental disagreements, as we've seen, about the role and remit of the ECB. We had the court case in Germany, where the Germany's constitutional court was openly questioning the authority of the European Court of Justice and the soundness of its 2018 judgment over actions taken by the European Central Bank. So there's a lot of uncertainty within the EU about over the legal order, the EU legal order, and the prerogatives of European institutions compared with national legal bodies. And I think there's many other threats to European stability as well, which again may have receded in recent years and during the pandemic, but we'll come back. I mean, obviously we have Brexit and what the fallout from that will be over the medium term. We have disagreement about how to manage migration policy and the proper balance between national and pooled sovereignty. And we have these kind of increased divergences between Brussels and some member states, and also between elites and their populations about values. And into that mix, we can also see that we have other powers such as China and Russia and Turkey, which are also playing a significant role especially in Eastern Europe, but also in Western Europe too. And there's a lot of disagreement within the bloc about how to handle that and how to treat these countries too. So I think the potential for lots of divisions over many different issues, there's still potential is quite great. And we're likely to see more of these sort of rancorous discussions within the EU.
We pretty much answered all three questions in one answer, complete, about the divisions in Europe, about the values, about the future of the EU. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for being our guest at the World of 2021 in Serbia. So I hope we'll meet again next year.
Thank you very much indeed, and good luck with the event.